Howard,
Jake. Another week of marketing and sales and go to market.
I
How's the
think
week
that
been?
it's been incredible. We are doing the full funnel, and sometimes I feel like we go deep in the funnel, and sometimes we're at the top. I think today's going to be an exciting time because we're going to bring in someone with an expertise, which is actually truthful back to marketing. Sometimes we go into product, into finance, into
Yeah,
some of these other
yeah. Like
aspects.
I said, we want to give different voices to many different people. Uh, we've had guests that we both know. We have guests that either I know and you don't know, and guests that you know and I don't know. But today is actually a first for us. We have a guest that we both don't know. We may have interacted on LinkedIn, but we've never had a conversation. So I'm excited for our chat to learn something new, right? We also that's part of the podcast for us to learn and grow, and for our audience to hear some insights. And it's also, like you said, it's good to get back into marketing. I guess
So
without
let's
further,
introduce,
yeah, let's
yeah,
just go right into it.
let's
Chris
introduce Chris Silvestri, who's
Chris
our new
Silvestri,
guest.
welcome.
Hey Jake,
Chris,
Howard, thank you so much for having me. It's a blast.
well, let's get some energy here, Chris. You don't know where you're at. You're with the mob, the B2B mob.
Yes,
The
yes,
B2B mob.
exciting for especially for like I enjoy open-ended conversations because typically these podcasts like come with like a pre-set of questions and like pretty rigid. Sometimes the host even reads the question, which is
Oh,
not
great.
great. Let me tell you. So I really love these like open-ended conversation with people who know their stuff. So excited for this.
Now, Chris, if
Great.
I understand, you know about choosing the right words because that's what you've been doing professionally. You are a wordsmith. You're a conversion alchemist, which is a pretty fancy choice of words. Where are we going to be focusing the conversation? I want to get into
Yeah,
messaging
tell
and
us a
how it
little bit.
impacts.
Exactly. Tell us a little about yourself, your background,
Yeah.
and how can the mob help you?
Yeah, so I love talking about anything from positioning strategy, messaging strategy, copywriting. Those are all aspects of my typical projects with clients, which are mostly B2B SaaS companies. And my background, I actually have quite a weird background. So I was a software engineer in industrial automation. So it's not the typical software engineering that you think about when you think about like web development or apps. It's a completely different field. Imagine like a factory. We were building automatic assembly machines that operators basically use to build these components. Typically, in my case, were like components for hospitals, because where I'm from in Italy, it's a very, they call it the biomedical valley. It's
Interesting.
very biomedical focused, and so there was a lot of logic, a lot of UX as well, because I was designing the human machine interfaces, those touchscreen displays that
I love
operators
that.
use.
I used to watch How It's Made. Do you ever watch How It's Made?
Yeah, I think so. I watched a
Yeah,
couple
it's a
of.
show that. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's
yeah, yeah.
always focused on the factory. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And at the same time, I also had a band. I'm a drummer, been playing drums for like 20 plus years. And I got kind of sick of having to ask for time off 3 months in advance to go touring. So I decided, why don't I look for how to make money online, right? So I started looking into it, did a couple of things, Amazon businesses, blogging, different stuff for a couple of years. And then I stumbled on copywriting and was instantly hooked by the psychology behind it, understanding of decision making process. And so not really only by the writing, but about everything that's behind and before the writing. And so I did that a couple of years on the side, and then moved to the UK in 2018 and went full time on it. So from 2018, I did a couple of other things, worked as a UX lead at a usability testing startup that taught me a lot about user experience design and how people actually consume content and digest it and go through friction on websites. And then
So how did
I
you?
built
Sorry.
Conversion Alchemy, which is basically what I'm doing right now.
So how do you tie in a lot? I mean, a drummer, an engineer, mechanical engineer, I believe, and a writer. How did you tie it all together? What's your philosophy when it
Yeah.
comes to messaging and what you're doing now?
Yeah, so a lot of companies or like even other copywriters, I think they see copywriting, messaging as more like the actual the craft of writing and sometimes creative, or even just like the actual words on a page. The way that I see messaging is more as a system, as kind of architecture that it lives in the background and covers all your marketing channels, your marketing assets, and kind of helps you scale all your like different marketing activities, right? So it's when I work with clients, I try to install a messaging system that helps them scale, that helps them speak with the same voice, talking about the same messaging pillars, and yeah, it probably comes from my software engineering mindset as more like systems thinking, and then try to apply it to the copywriting and messaging.
Chris, it sounds like you are a professional, but the elephant in the room nowadays is that everyone has a writing assistant. We don't even have to go to the special assistants who are designed for that, but every Tom, Dick, and Harry software has that. And then we've all mastered this super prompt, which takes into our tone of voice. So how are you continuing to justify this expertise? And there's no doubt there's an expertise. You can see the metrics of when it works and when it doesn't work. But it must be a challenging sale with people who are there are things that people don't know at all. And then people think that they know how to write and they know how to do copyright. So how do you get someone from their comfort zone, oh, I'm good at this, and I even use some AI tools for it, to a point where they acknowledge that they need a superhero like yourself?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question. And I think, I mean, apart from the content that I write online, I try to educate people and companies about the fact that first, 70% of my work is research. And so that basically means that even before we go into the strategy or we write a single word, we need to do the research. And a lot of companies don't really know how to do research properly, or maybe they have a scattered research that they can't turn into messaging strategy and copy. And so that's a big part of why clients hire me for like to help them with.
Yeah, it sounds familiar. Like Jake, we spoke to a product marketer last week, Shoshana, and a lot of what she was describing was, I think she called it maybe was it outbound, like in the sense of like she would go out and do the research to speak to the customers, speak to the products from a product marketing standpoint. From her background was an investigative journalist, right? So she went deep before even again writing word one. It's understanding. So we're hearing a lot of that, and it's good to hear that is the bedrock. I think when we in our early discussions, Jake, we were talking, when we talk about demand gen, we maybe framed content as like the fuel, but now we're asking, how is that fuel made? What's in the fuel? Is it premium? Is it unleaded? Is it 95 or is it 89?
So I like that question. So Chris, but it sounds to me that most people still feel a degree of confidence in that, and for you to go and say, let's do a deep dive on your customer. Well, everyone thinks that they're the master of their customer, that they've had the conversations, they've recorded every call, they've analyzed it, they've lived it for 5 years. How do you tell them that, no, it's time to take a breather and let's let an outsider expert take a look and do this research properly? How do you convince them, and when do they know that they can do that work?
So luckily, a lot of the clients that work with me, they kind of understand that they've mainly an alignment problem, or they struggle to differentiate themselves or to explain how different they are. And so it's just a matter of explaining, okay, this is the process, this is how we're going to do it. But typically when I jump in, and if there's people who maybe still think that they know or that they know better, what I like to do is first, other than interviewing their customers or running surveys or looking at website analytics or user interaction data, I speak with all different team members. And there's a couple of questions that I ask internally to all team members without them knowing what the other guys say. And then I bring all those answers together, and those tell me, okay, are these guys aligned? Are they saying the same exact things? What's their messaging hierarchy, right? Are they able to explain it? And oftentimes when I ask those questions, you can see that everyone has got a different way of explaining what they do, who they do it for, and how unique or different or better they are. And so that's a very clear telltale sign that tells me, okay,
agree,
like, and tells them as well, this is like, we need to do this research and deep work.
If you ask, I'm sure if you ask 3 different salespeople, the marketing team, the product team, of course, and even R&D, what they do and how they do it, you're gonna get a lot of different answers. Jake, you're being generous by saying so many teams know exactly what they're doing.
Well, I would say everyone thinks they know what they're doing, but I would say
they know.
So, once you have the attention, how do you break in? How are you getting people to say, yes, I want to take on a multi-month deep investigation? No one wants to go for that, medical examination, whereas, some people recognize things are off track and they'll come to it. But it sounds to me that people think that there's a quick fix. We think that messaging can be done, and if I spar with a ChatGPT, then I can figure it out. And you're saying, no, I want to do a deep diligence, customer interviews, job to get done, phones. You want to look at my product? No, thanks. I don't have bandwidth for that. I have experts on my, I just want to understand your sales process so that I can feel the pain, and I want to feel stupid that I'm not working with Chris right now.
Yeah. So first thing that I do when I jump into like with a prospect, I don't really like throw everything at them. So I try to diagnose their problem. And to me, there's looking at positioning, messaging, and copy. Where are they struggling and where do we need to fill in the gaps? And based on that, I come up with a custom strategy. So it doesn't necessarily need to be like a 3-month project. If we know that they have a clear positioning, clear differentiation, but they maybe struggle to define their 3 core value themes or key messaging pillars, then we just do maybe a messaging workshop. Maybe we look at research that they already have, especially if they say, oh, we've already done the research, then let me look at the research. If you have it and everything is in place, obviously we don't need to redo anything, right? So I try to optimize as much as possible and not like bloat or create redundancies if we don't need to.
Right. Jake, this is usually your question. But how does messaging, I think we spoke about this before, but how does messaging translate to ROI? How does it bring in the dollars? I think a lot of there's companies at different stages, but there are all sorts of motions that are very tactical, and they can say, hey, I can bring a bunch of conversations to the tables and conversions and just run our pipeline. How do you know when it's the messaging that needs adjustment or improvement or change because the markets are different?
To me, like a lot of my clients are sales led rather than product led, and so a lot of the initial signs, we see them through the sales teams, and when they present their decks or they pitch their product, if we see like the same objections coming up and they don't really know how to address them, or if they explain the product, as you said, different sales guys, or they define the product differently, they don't really have a clear strategy. So those are all signs that we need to work on the messaging. And then, as I said, we try to align all team members, sales, marketing, product, support, and make sure that there's no red flags in any of these departments, and try to like patch and fill in the gaps where we need to.
Once you have the messaging lockdown, what are some of the first initial experiments or go-to-market activities that okay, this is now validated?
Interestingly, just worked with a private equity firm that they typically just acquire tech companies, and so for this company specifically, a French company, they needed to kind of redo the whole website and also their sales collaterals for different personas as well. Just because their old website, the messaging was basically just random, was the founder who just threw some words on it and just.
I can imagine this PE website. I think the private equities have a certain reputation. We've all seen these websites.
And so. So from the messaging, the first things that we did while we were still kind of developing the messaging, even before writing the actual copy, we had a couple of part of the messaging is the value proposition canvas, I call it, which is basically for each persona that we've identified, we are going through define examples of problem statements, implications, solutions, benefits, jobs to be done, and examples of copy in different situations, different variants, whether it's a call to action or a paragraph or a couple of headlines. And so we already had a couple of messaging bits and pieces that we could test. And so we launched them on like a very raw MVP version of the website. The guys they actually led the go-to-market there, started running some ads, and we could already see like how do these variants perform. We ran kind of like a mini A/B test, and so those were very good early signs that told us okay, this copy like we should lean more on this angle rather than this other one. And then from there we actually expanded and developed the full messaging framework and the actual copy for I think 30 plus pages of the website, and the sales text, sales collaterals. So sales text is another good way that sales teams can actually start to validate the messaging that you produce even before you jump on working on the website, for example.
Right. There's always that slide that people kind of like stop at, right? If you want to create that magic slide where the buyer goes, hold on one second, what's that?
Yeah. To me, a lot of the sales tech work that we do is in finding that specific point of view, that insight, and that's typically where I like to start. So when you and we typically figure it out with the founder mostly or marketer. I like to ask them what do you think is wrong or with the industry, and how do you solve for that, or what kind of mistakes your customers are making and how do you fix them, or what are some myths, lies, or misconceptions in the industry and how do you solve for those. All those information gives us very good insight into what is their unique point of view that led them to actually building that product that we can use as a hook. And then we go, this is what we are seeing in the industry, right? You might have tried to solve it in these other ways, which are the competitive alternatives. We do it this way, and this is why, and these are the results, and then you go into the introducing the product. So this is typical.
Chris, I gotta jump in here. You're telling me about a methodology about wordsmithing, and I think that many of our customers that we are approaching are no longer reading. They are influenced by images, by videos, and experience. So it doesn't mean that the hierarchy of messaging is not important. It means that the importance of word choice and messaging is often lost with character choice and development and what we were able to produce on video and mid-journey. So I need you to set things straight. Where does that fit? When you were talking about messaging and copywriting, there's times that people read, and there's more times that people don't read. And if you talk to any aggressive demand generation, they're going to put a lot of video in their mix and a lot of experience in their mix. Can you speak to that and how the work of a marketer of lead should think about the importance of what you're talking about and how much to invest in that versus, long form, short form content is out the door. Now we're going to experiential imagery and video. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, well, I think like if you think about it, like a good messaging strategy and good copy are actually the foundation for any of these materials. Like a good video, like you can't write the script if you don't have your messaging strategy in place, your key messaging pillars. So you should have.
You have to know what you want to say, right?
Exactly. So all of that stems from still good messaging, good research. But the other thing that I try to pay attention to a lot is I call it the UX of copy. Maybe it stems from my background as a UX designer, but after watching thousands of usability tests, it's still crazy to me when you look at how people consume a website, go through it, and where they click and where they stumble on. You can see that like your expectations might be completely different from how people actually engage with the website, and so you have to make it easy to skim, frictionless as possible, easy to digest, read, full of.
I was gonna say something similar to that earlier. You mentioned, you sometimes meet a founder and they're gonna, they lead with why they built the product, and it's a good way to start the messaging process. But do you also find that maybe even the founders or even executive management, they might be totally off on the market itself? What's the What's your experience with that? So it's kind of related, right? You expect your users to behave one way. You're then fed information. It kind of creates a feedback loop, so to speak. Kind of like when you bring that microphone to the speaker.
Yeah. So you're saying basically when, I don't know, founders or executives are not clear on what their like point of view is.
Right, and I'm just tying it together from what you were saying, how you're bringing that.
Yeah.
Then you're creating a messaging framework. Then you're using that framework to influence ads and website behavior, like you were just describing. You know, we might expect a user to go down one way, but they do something else.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's sometimes a clash, and what happens when there is a clash? What do you tell what do you tell your founder and say, hey, we thought one thing and it's actually totally different?
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, and it happens quite often, and that's why I think the research work is so important, because that's also data that you bring up to these executives and founders, and you tell them, okay, this is what we saw. How are you solving for this? Like, are you really in it for the right reasons or for the differentiated reasons? And then you basically show them these are the pain points, these are the motivations that our customers have, and this is how competitors are solving for them, right? Because I try to always cover in my research 3 areas, which is the internal side, which is speaking with the team founder, then the external side, which is prospects and customers or even churned customers, and then the market side, which is competitors, looking at reviews, so and the industry, right? So all of those 3 give you a very good picture that you can bring up to executives and kind of act as a mirror for them, to make them think, make them reflect, and then
sometimes it's validated, but sometimes it's a hard truth.
Yeah.
So, wow. So tell us one story where you really had a breakthrough, where you thought something that we can inspire people who are otherwise sitting on the fence and say they're still in that approach of, I got this. I don't think I need to get Chris's expertise. I have my messaging hierarchy. This is what I stand for. That's my H1. That's my H2. Shake our confidence so that we know to pay more attention and do this due diligence.
Yeah, totally. So recent example is probably with this data quality management company that I was working with. And it was a classic case of the founder being like a long-time founder, and they had a very clear and opinionated vision and kind of opinion as well on why, like what their customers wanted to hear, kind of the motivations, which was all about being the data space for them, data privacy, especially because they are in Europe as well. So data privacy and compliance, super important for them, especially when you're sell to enterprise. But then we dove into the research and we found that their actual more powerful angle that they could take was actually helping specific companies, specific use cases solve their specific data problems. So they were thinking, for example, we help companies completely change their data infrastructure, data architecture, replace it with ours. And what their customers, the best fit customers wanted was actually just them to help them solve specific data problems to specific use cases. And that basically changed everything in the messaging, because as you can see, you go from super broad, super ambitious to more like super specific, actionable, cost effective. So everything changes.
Sure. You have to know your customers. You have to know the right fit customers, right? You might think you're going after a large, everyone likes to talk about very large TAM. But if you really know your stuff, that, instead of saying your TAM is in the trillions, you might be okay with several billion, if it makes sense. I think a lot of companies need to recognize that. It makes sense.
Yeah. And one thing that I like to say as well is that people think large TAM, and maybe they think, we need to have to be super clear on our ICPs, exactly who they are. But I've seen cases when maybe you're just repositioning yourself, so you kind of need to create some early customer personas. Right. And in that case, like for some companies, it's instead of having, I don't know, the CMO, CFO personas or the CTO, like super specific, we just created two broader personas, which was one of the was the business buyer, the other was technical buyer, for example. And we kind of started at least putting some messaging out using these two broader groups that at least gave us a very effective and very quick way to get started and collect some data as we went.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because if you're talking about early stage, I was going to go there about how do we use this, and before I do a deep dive, how can I use copywriting to test even TAM response? So I know we're going to end shortly, but I'd love to know, for those of you who don't necessarily, who are listening, have the deep pockets or can hire Chris, give us a little bit of a tip of an actual thing that we are testing out messaging, value props, differentiation points, and we don't have necessarily the time or the budget to do deep. How can give me a story of how I can use some of the techniques you have and maybe a media to prove this out, or to at least point me in the right direction such that we can re-engage 6 months later with you.
So I actually, interestingly, just published a deep dive report on synthetic research. And so there's a lot of skeptics on this and different sides of the equation. Synthetic research is basically using AI to simulate your customers or creating digital twins of your customers, or even expand your persona so you can do larger scale tests. And so in my report, I go through like the current state of synthetic research, different methodologies, different use cases as well. But there's a super easy ways that you can actually get started. There's platforms that do it for you, which are cost effective, and you can basically create your personas. I don't know, create 50, 100, 200 personas, test your messaging with them, or ask them questions, go deeper. And the way that I like to do it is typically start with real research, obviously. So if you have real human research, start with that and augment your research with these synthetic personas. But you can also do it manually. So the way that I did it at the beginning, when I was starting out 2 years ago with the stuff, I literally used my clients' data, created kind of their own personas through all the interview transcripts that I had, or survey data, or even just reviews, publicly available data. And I tried to simulate these personas just simply with a simple prompt on Claude, for example, right? Wear the shoes of the personas, stay in character, give me their thoughts in a thought bracket so I can also see what you're thinking. And and obviously it's not going to be 100% accurate, but for a company that doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the time, trust me that even getting 70% accuracy is super important and super powerful for testing messaging and getting started. So I would say first thing, if you at least want to start testing messaging and you don't have resources or time, either use one of these platforms that are available, or start prompting AI to kind of create your own customer personas, expand them as you go, and test messaging that way.
Oh, that's good insight. That's good insight. I have one more question before we say our farewells. Do you still do touring? Are you still a drummer?
I actually just started playing with a band here, but it's not like at that level. I used to tour. We toured Russia, Europe, a couple of months at a time. Now it's a bit more like weekend stuff.
All right, nice, very cool. How can people reach you?
So people can find me on conversionalchemy.net, my website, and I'm mostly on LinkedIn, just sharing and connecting with people and chatting.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jake, Howard.
It was really enjoyable. It was a great chat.
Cheers.
And send that report, and we'll include it in the show notes and comments on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure. I'll send you everything
so that the listeners could have a read. Take care.
Yeah,
bye.
Thank you.
Well, Howard,
Jake, that was great. I really do like how we're hearing from, like, on many topics. We hear from a lot of different things, but again, it's hitting on that trend of knowing your customers, knowing your ideal customer really well in order to get your message right. And it's one of those key parts of product market fit. I think it's actually coming from the change of the economics and what's going on as far as VC money and raising capital. Used to be, right? Used to have an idea with a couple of POCs or design partners, and you get money, and they would say, here, go ahead and spend it. And the money would be spent, right? But that's before even finding out what your real product market fit is, what your real ICPs are, and a lot of money at a lot of startups often went wasted. I think that's part of the trends. That's like, we have to really understand this stuff before going forward. What do you think?
I would say adding one point to that, with the ease of writing right now, everyone can say a lot of words.
Such a challenge. Yeah.
And so how do you get cut through? And so generally people go for quantity, not quality. And so I think Chris brings a sober voice, and so does Shoshana, and some of the other things about, I think
it comes to quality. I think we didn't touch on it, but I think we deep down, we use AI, and even, I'm sure those synthetic personas, like you said, get you 70% of the way. I love to build vibe coding. It's like, it's not perfect, right? It gets you part of the way.
Right. So, okay, I think it's great. It was great to have a different voice at the table.
Yeah, it was really fun
that Chris came out. And Howard, it's always fun to see you and
always great to see you and connect. We'll talk later. Take care.
Okay,
bye everyone.
Take care.